She walked in with rain-matted hair and plastic bags for shoes. No makeup, no name, no one waiting for her at home. Just a girl the world had already decided was nothing. The staff laughed, the neighbors whispered. Her foster parents slammed the door behind her like they were erasing a stain. But they didn't know that behind her tired eyes lived something they couldn't measure. Kindness. And on the coldest night of her life, when she chose to help a stranger instead of walking past, fate finally decided to rewrite her story. Because that stranger wasn't just anyone, and that girl, it was never meant to stay forgotten. Elena never sat at the dining table. She wasn't forbidden to, not with words, but with silence, with the way her plate was always on the kitchen counter, separate from the rest. She ate leftovers after the real family finished. They called her lucky to have a roof over her head. She called it survival. Her mornings began before the sun, scrubbing tiles, washing school uniforms that weren't hers, and packing lunches she wouldn't eat. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore had taken her in out of charity after her parents died in a car crash when she was 6. But what started as sympathy had long hardened into cold convenience. 15 years later, Elena was still the girl in the corner. "You're not like Emily," Mrs. Whitmore often said. "She's ours. You're just here." Emily was their pride, blonde, privileged, pristine. Elena was the one who ironed her dresses, fetched her forgotten books, and absorbed her insults without flinching. That evening, as the family sat laughing in the living room, Elena quietly washed dishes in the background. Water sloshed, plates clinked. She wasn't invisible, but she was made to feel like it. Mr. Whitmore's booming laugh rose above the TV show. "Did you hear?" he said. "Emily just got accepted to Stanford. Our daughter's going places." Mrs. Whitmore wiped a fake tear. "We've done our job." Elena's hand froze in the soapy water. She had filled out college applications too, in secret after midnight, using borrowed Wi-Fi. But her name never came up, not once. When she turned to leave, Emily called from the couch. "Oh, and Elena, I spilled nail polish in my room. You'll clean it, right?" Elena forced a smile. "Of course." Upstairs, the pink stain on the carpet was deliberate. The smug look on Emily's face confirmed it. Elena knelt anyway, dabbing the carpet with acetone, whispering, "One day, this won't be my life." But she wasn't sure she believed it. In that house, dreams didn't survive long. They were silenced the way she was, neatly, politely, and without a trace. That night, she lay on a mattress in the laundry room, curled beneath a towel instead of a blanket, listening to the soft hum of the washer and the silence of a family that never really wanted her. And yet, somewhere beyond those cold walls, destiny was waiting, and it wasn't done with Elena yet. The rain came down in cold, brutal sheets, as if the sky itself had decided to spit her out, just like they had. Elena stood on the porch with a small plastic bag, her entire life reduced to 3 shirts, a toothbrush, and a tattered photo of her biological mother she had never dared hang on the wall. Her clothes were soaked through, and her shoes squelched with every step. Behind her, Mrs. Whitmore's voice rang with sharp finality. "You stole from this house, Elena. We took you in, and this is how you repay us?" Elena's eyes widened, her throat dry. "I didn't take anything." "Don't lie," Emily sneered from behind her mother. "I saw you in Dad's study yesterday. The drawer was open." "I was dropping off his dry cleaning," Elena said quietly, rain dripping down her face like tears she refused to show. But they'd already made up their minds. Mr. Whitmore didn't even come out. He just shouted from the kitchen, "Get off my property before I call the police." A small part of her waited for Mrs. Whitmore to hesitate, to soften, to remember the years she had spent raising their daughter like a sister, cleaning their messes, and pretending their approval mattered. But no. The door slammed shut. Elena stood there for another moment, letting the rain baptize her into her new reality. She didn't cry, not yet. Her feet carried her through puddles, past trimmed hedges and streetlights that blinked like warning signs. She had nowhere to go. Her phone had 4% battery, no money, no umbrella, no one to call. Her body was cold, but her mind was colder. They had wanted to believe she was nothing. Maybe they had even convinced her. But in this moment, this soaking, shivering, silent moment, something inside her refused to break. By midnight, she found shelter under the overhang of a small alley behind a grocery store. She curled into herself, hugging her knees, watching as cars rolled past. Warm people inside laughing, sipping lattes, living lives that had always been locked away from her. Then, the sound of something crashing pulled her out of her thoughts. A wooden crate of fruit had tipped over across the alley. An old man slipped, landing hard on the wet concrete. Without hesitation, Elena ran to him. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, that small act of instinctual kindness, would be the one choice that rewrote her entire life. Because the man she helped wasn't just some old stranger. He was the beginning of a storm she was about to step into, and he was watching her closely. The old man groaned, trying to push himself up, but his knees buckled again. Elena reached him in seconds, kneeling on the wet concrete without hesitation. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, her voice breathless but steady. His gray hair was slicked against his forehead, and his coat was soaked, but there was something sharp in his eyes, clear, observant, as if even pain couldn't dull his focus. "I think I twisted something," he muttered, wincing. Without another word, Elena slipped under his arm and helped him sit up against the brick wall. She took off her thin cardigan and folded it, placing it under his head. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't complain. She just stayed. When she noticed the fruit scattered across the ground, she picked it up quietly, returning each apple and banana to the wooden crate, her fingers numb with cold. "You didn't have to help," he said after a long pause, watching her. "I know," she replied softly, "but someone should." He tilted his head. "What's your name?" "Elena. Do you live nearby?" A small, bitter smile flickered across her lips. "Not anymore." He didn't press. Instead, he slowly reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, but hesitated before handing it to her. "Do you need a place to stay tonight?" She blinked. "I don't take money from strangers." He chuckled, a low, gravelly sound. "Good. I wasn't offering money. I'm offering safety. My driver's just around the corner. He'll take you to one of my houses. A guest cottage. Nothing fancy." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because in 30 years of business," he said slowly, "I've watched thousands of people walk by others in pain. But tonight, one didn't." The car that pulled up wasn't just any car. It was a black luxury SUV, the kind she'd only ever seen in movies. A driver in a suit stepped out and opened the door. "Miss Elena?" he asked politely. She looked at the stranger. "Who are you, really?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'll find out soon enough." Elena slid into the back seat, heart racing, the warmth of the leather contrasting violently with the frost that clung to her skin. As the car pulled away from the alley that had nearly become her shelter, she glanced back at the man still sitting against the wall, except he was now standing, posture tall, coat straightened, speaking into a phone with a presence far too commanding for a simple vendor. Something about him didn't add up. She didn't know his name, but he already knew hers. And that alone was about to change everything. The car glided through the city like a shadow, quiet and seamless. Elena sat in the back seat, clutching her plastic bag like a lifeline, eyes darting between the glowing city skyline and the driver's silent focus. She didn't ask questions. She had learned a long time ago that questions rarely got answers, and answers rarely brought comfort. The car finally turned off the main road and entered a private driveway lined with trimmed hedges and lantern-lit trees. At the end stood a stone guest house, elegant but not ostentatious, with ivy climbing its walls and warm light spilling from its windows. A housekeeper greeted her with a kind smile. "Miss Elena, we've prepared a room for you. The bath is ready and clothes are on the bed. You must be freezing." Elena blinked. "You knew I was coming?" The woman only nodded, her eyes kind but unreadable. "Please, rest. Mr. Vale will speak with you in the morning." Mr. Vale. So, that was his name. She hadn't known what to expect when she stepped into the house. Certainly not a crackling fireplace, soft slippers, or a bed layered with clean sheets and folded towels that smelled of lavender. The moment she closed the bedroom door behind her, Elena broke. Not from fear, but from the strange, overwhelming kindness. No shouting, no chores, no conditions, just silence and warmth. Her fingers trembled as she touched the fabric of a wool sweater placed at the foot of the bed. She had never owned anything this soft. That night, she curled beneath the blankets like someone afraid it might all be a dream. She didn't sleep much, But for the first time in years, she didn't cry herself into exhaustion. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the room, and with it came something new, stillness that didn't feel empty. A breakfast tray waited outside her door. Scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh orange juice. She ate slowly, wondering what price would eventually come. At 9 sharp, the housekeeper returned and led her down a stone path to a glass conservatory at the back of the estate. There, standing beside a piano and a wall of books, was Jonathan Vale. He wore a navy sweater, no tie, no bodyguards, just calm power and eyes that had seen far more than they revealed. "You came," he said simply. Elena nodded. "You sent a car." He gestured for her to sit. "Tell me about yourself, not what they told you to be. Who are you, really?" She hesitated. No one had ever asked her that before. I don't know," she admitted. "Then we'll figure it out," he said, pouring her tea. "Starting today." She watched him carefully. He wasn't just wealthy. He was precise. And beneath that precision, there was something else. Grief, maybe, or hope, or both. But what she didn't know yet, what she couldn't possibly guess, was that Jonathan Vale hadn't brought her here out of pity. No, there was something far more personal brewing behind his calm demeanor. Something that would shake both of their worlds when the past finally came knocking. It happened on the 3rd morning. Elena had begun adjusting to the silence. Not the silence of cold walls, but the kind that allowed her to breathe without waiting for a command. Jonathan didn't hover. He simply gave her books to read, invited her to join quiet breakfasts, and listened. Really listened when she spoke. She never lied to him. She told him about the Whitmores, about her mattress beside the washing machine, and how she had applied to universities using stolen minutes on Emily's laptop. And Jonathan, for all his wealth and walls of influence, never once looked at her like she was lesser. But that morning, as she bent to retrieve a teacup that had slipped from her tray, her sweater collar dipped just enough to reveal it. A tiny silver pendant, heart-shaped, tarnished from age. Jonathan froze. "Where did you get that?" His voice didn't rise, but something inside it cracked. Elena straightened, startled. "This? I've had it since I was little. It was with me in the hospital after the accident that killed my parents. Well, my biological ones." Jonathan stepped closer, eyes locked on the necklace like it was a ghost. "Do you know what it is?" She shrugged. "Just a keepsake. I never took it off. Even when my foster mother told me it looked cheap." He took a deep breath and turned away. "May I see it?" She hesitated, then slowly unclasped it, placing it in his palm. The way he stared at it made her chest tighten. "My daughter had one just like this," he said. "We lost her in a fire 20 years ago. She was 4. The police said the body matched, that the necklace was gone in the blaze. But my wife, before she died, always believed our child had survived. She never stopped searching." Elena felt her breath vanish. "You think I'm—" He shook his head gently. "I don't know, but this necklace, it was custom made. Only 2 were ever created, one for my wife, one for our daughter. Silence stretched between them, not heavy, sacred." "Would you let me run a DNA test?" Jonathan asked, his voice almost apologetic. Elena nodded slowly. "If there's a chance, I want to know too." Later that evening, when Elena lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, the pendant back around her neck, her heart refused to settle. She didn't know what scared her more. The possibility that she truly belonged somewhere, or that she didn't. Outside her window, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a truth neither of them was ready to face. And somewhere inside the mansion, Jonathan stood by an old photo on the fireplace mantel, touching the edge of a little girl's smile, wondering if fate had just returned something it had stolen long ago, or if this was just another cruel echo of hope. The results came 3 days later, sealed in a white envelope with the logo of a discreet genetics lab embossed on the corner. Jonathan stared at it in silence as it sat untouched on the edge of his desk. Elena stood nearby, arms crossed loosely, trying to hide the storm behind her composed expression. "Whatever it says," she whispered, "I'm still grateful for everything." He looked up, and for a moment he was no longer the formidable Jonathan Vale, the man who built empires, but just a father, afraid to reopen a wound. Slowly, he broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Silence. Then a long exhale. "Negative," he said. "You're not my daughter." The words didn't land like a slap. They didn't shatter her. They floated, gently devastating. Elena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I figured," she said, trying to smile, but her voice trembled. "That would have been too much to hope for." Jonathan didn't speak. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the trees rustling beyond the estate walls. "But," he said after a long pause, "you saved a man who had nothing left to believe in. You stepped into an alley and gave your warmth without knowing who I was. You reminded me what decency looks like, and maybe that's more important than blood." She looked at him, unsure if she was imagining what she was hearing. "What are you saying?" He turned around fully now, eyes glassy but fierce. "I'm saying I'd like to adopt you, Elena. Not because of who you might have been, but because of who you are." Her breath caught. You would do that?" "I don't want to offer you charity," he said. "I want to offer you family, a real one. And not because you need saving, but because you deserve choosing." For a girl who had never heard the words, "I choose you," from anyone, not her birth family, not her foster parents, this moment felt like the first breath after drowning. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'd want that." That night, the papers were drawn up. The lawyers were discreet. The process would take time, but for once, Elena didn't feel like she was waiting for life to begin. It had already started, in a mansion she wasn't born into, with a man who hadn't created her, but saw her anyway. And, as they toasted quietly over dinner, not champagne, but hot chocolate at her request, Jonathan smiled across the table. "Welcome home, daughter." And just like that, without a drop of shared blood, Elena became someone new. Not because of a name, but because someone finally believed she was worth more than survival. She was worth belonging. The news broke like wildfire. Billionaire Jonathan Vale adopts unknown girl found homeless. Tabloids speculated, blogs spun fairy tales. But the truth remained quietly nestled inside Vale Manor. Elena had finally found a home. She no longer slept with her bag tucked under her pillow. She walked upright, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. But comfort has a way of echoing too far. And 3 towns away, in a modest suburban home with peeling paint and 2 frightened mortgage payments, Mrs. Whitmore dropped her teacup when she saw Elena's face on the evening news. "That little rat," she breathed. "She's still alive?" Emily stared at the screen, mouth agape. "Wait, isn't that—" Mr. Whitmore stood behind them, arms crossed. "We need to talk to her." "Talk?" Mrs. Whitmore snapped. "We need to make things right, publicly, before she ruins us with some sob story." But it wasn't shame that sent them to Vale Manor. It was the opportunity. 3 days later, they arrived in a borrowed Mercedes, dressed like grief-stricken saints. They were greeted at the front gate by a security team who already had instructions. But when Jonathan saw their names, he allowed them in, just once. Elena waited on the veranda, composed in a white blouse and navy skirt, her chin high, hands folded in her lap. They barely recognized her. She looked taller somehow, not in height, but in presence. Mrs. Whitmore approached with a trembling smile. "Elena, darling, we came as soon as we heard. We've missed you." Elena didn't flinch. "Did you miss me when I was sleeping on the street?" Emily interjected. "We were shocked, okay? We thought you ran off. We thought you were angry." "You kicked me out," Elena said, voice flat. "You believed I stole from you without a second thought." "We were under stress," Mr. Whitmore said quickly. "But look at you now. God has been good to you, and we're happy for you. That's why we wanted to come." "To say sorry?" she asked. "Yes," Mrs. Whitmore said. "And we were wondering if there's a way we could help. Maybe be part of your life again." Jonathan stepped onto the veranda behind her. "Or perhaps," he said smoothly, "you'd like a share of my estate." The smiles on their faces froze. He continued, "We've dealt with people like you before. Users. You threw her out like garbage. Now you want in because she found gold. I don't tolerate parasites." "Excuse me?" Mr. Whitmore began, but Jonathan cut him off. "Leave, while I'm still being polite." They turned to Elena, searching for sympathy, but found only the girl they had built with their own cruelty. Stronger, sharper, untouchable. "You taught me something," Elena said quietly. "You taught me what love is not. And that lesson is the only thing I'm grateful for. With that, she stood, walked past them, and didn't look back. The guards escorted them to their car. As the gates closed, the Whitmores realized too late. They hadn't just lost access to wealth. They had lost the only person who ever gave their home a soul. The announcement was held at the Vail Foundation's annual gala. A night of glittering gowns, sharp tuxedos, and whispered speculation. Journalists had been warned, but curiosity could not be tamed. Why was Jonathan Vail, one of the most private billionaires in the country, suddenly attending with a young woman at his side who had no last name anyone recognized? Elena stood beside him in a simple navy dress, no diamonds, no heels too tall to walk in, just grace wrapped in quiet steel. As they entered the ballroom, heads turned, cameras flashed, and murmurs rippled through the crowd like rising wind. But Elena walked like someone who had faced worse than stares. She had once stood in the rain, alone, with nothing but a plastic bag. This was nothing. Jonathan took the stage after the dinner, his presence commanding silence before he even spoke. "Tonight is not about philanthropy," he began. "It's about legacy. And sometimes, legacy is not what you leave behind, but who you choose to lift up along the way." He gestured to Elena, who stepped forward under the chandelier light. "This is Elena Vail. As of today, she is my legal daughter and sole heir. She carries no Vail blood, but she carries the spirit this name was built on." Gasps followed. One board member dropped his fork. Someone in the back whispered, "She's the girl from the story, the one who was homeless." Elena's heart thudded, but she didn't tremble. She took the microphone, her voice calm. "I wasn't born with this name, but names don't define who we are. Choices do. And Jonathan Vail didn't choose me because I looked the part. He chose me because I chose not to let the world turn me cruel." She paused, scanning the crowd. "There are thousands of girls like me, forgotten, unseen, discarded. Tonight, we're creating a new initiative under the Vail Foundation to find them, fund them, and remind them survival is not the end of their story." The room erupted into applause, but Elena didn't smile for them. She smiled for the little girl she used to be, the one who slept beside a washing machine and still dared to dream of a home. After the speeches, people swarmed to offer congratulations, questions, and flattery, but she slipped away to the terrace, where the night air was quiet and real. Jonathan joined her minutes later, 2 glasses of cider in hand. "You were brilliant," he said. "You gave them something they didn't expect." "What's that?" she asked. "Dignity in a place obsessed with spectacle." They clinked glasses, but neither of them knew. The biggest revelation was still waiting. Because tomorrow morning, Elena would open a letter left on her pillow, in handwriting she'd never seen before, signed with the name of a woman she'd almost forgotten. Her mother. The morning sun spilled through sheer curtains as Elena stirred, still wrapped in the silence of the gala's aftermath. She reached for her phone, but something else caught her eye. A cream-colored envelope on her nightstand, aged at the corners, sealed with wax. Her name was handwritten on the front, in a script both foreign and familiar. Slowly she opened it, unfolding a single page written in gentle strokes. As her eyes scanned the words, her breath caught. "To the child I never stopped loving," it began. "If this reaches you, it means someone has done what I never could, kept my promise to you. You were born in a hospital room where I worked as a cleaner. Your father, a man who loved me in silence but belonged to another world, died before he could ever know you. When I fell ill, I begged the nurse to find you a better life, but I didn't know that in saving you, I was sending you into darkness. I prayed someone kind would find you, someone who would love you like I never got the chance to." Elena's hands trembled. The ink was faded in places, but the heart behind each word pulsed like a living thing. "I once cleaned the halls of the Vail estate. Mr. Vail's wife gave me food when I went hungry. She once told me, if anything ever happens to you, bring your daughter here. We'll take care of her. I never got to bring you, but maybe someone still kept that promise. Maybe fate walked a longer road than we planned." Tears rolled down Elena's cheeks before she could stop them. At the bottom of the letter was a name. Camila Ruiz. Her mother. A woman she only remembered through a voice that hummed lullabies in her dreams and the feeling of warmth she couldn't explain. She held the letter to her chest and let it anchor her. There had never been a coincidence. Not in the alley, not with Jonathan, not even in the necklace. This had always been the path. It just took pain, abandonment, and a chance encounter with a stranger to bring her back to it. Later that morning, she found Jonathan in the garden, trimming roses himself like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You knew my mother," she said, her voice still raw. He looked up, confused. She handed him the letter. He read it once, then again, slower this time, until his eyes glazed over. "Camilla," he whispered. "She was brave, quiet. She once stopped my wife from slipping on a staircase and never asked for anything in return." Elena sat beside him. "She trusted you." Jonathan nodded. "And I failed her. I didn't recognize you. But maybe she did something greater. She placed you into the world with just enough strength to survive until I could find you." They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. That day, a plaque was added in the garden beneath a newly planted tree, in honor of Camila Ruiz, a mother remembered. And Elena, for the first time in her life, no longer felt like a question mark in someone else's story. She was the answer. 6 months later, the girl they discarded stood before 1,000 people in a hall built for legacy. Elena Vale, no longer in borrowed sweaters or standing in shadows, was the keynote speaker at the launch of the Camilla Project, a nationwide initiative under the Vale Foundation designed to protect girls like her, left behind by systems and by people who should have loved them. She wore a simple white suit, her hair pinned back, her voice steady as she stepped to the podium. "I was once told I didn't belong at anyone's table," she began. "That I was lucky to even be given scraps. I was told my dreams were foolish, my worth conditional, my presence inconvenient." She paused. "But today, I stand here not because someone gave me a seat. I stand because someone chose to see me, not as a burden, but as a person. And because of that, I will spend the rest of my life making sure other girls are seen too." The applause came like thunder. Jonathan watched from the front row, hands clasped, eyes shining with a pride that went deeper than blood. Nearby, Emily Whitmore sat stiffly beside her parents, invited only as a courtesy. Elena had offered them front row seats, but not forgiveness. That was not a gift owed to those who only came crawling once the cameras turned on. As the event ended, a reporter pushed forward. "Miss Vale, what would you say to the people who once rejected you?" Elena didn't flinch. "I'd say thank you. If they hadn't closed the door, I would have never walked through the right one." Later that night, as she stood alone in the quiet garden beneath Camilla's tree, she touched the pendant at her neck and whispered, "We made it, Mom." Above her, the stars blinked like they always had. But now she wasn't alone beneath them. She had become more than what they tried to bury. She was not a mistake, not a charity case, not an accident. She was proof that sometimes the girl they throw away is the very one the world ends up remembering forever. They tried to erase her, humiliate her, and discard her like trash tossed into the rain. But today, they sat in the back of the room, watching the girl they once rejected command a stage built for kings. She didn't need revenge. Her power was quieter, stronger. She forgave the world not because it deserved it, but because she deserved peace. And as the lights dimmed and the applause roared, she smiled. Not for them, but for the girl she used to be, the one they threw away, the one who rose. So, remember this. Be careful who you look down on today, because tomorrow, they just might own the name you'll never forget.